All right, Nick, let's talk about the USC Trojans. We're talking about recruiting with the Trojans. I think there's been things in the past the Trojans have done really well, but they've fallen off of those in recent years. But there's one guy now in control of this team who's trying to get them back into the fold. I think this is going to be a really great update for Trojans fans, so stay tuned for that. But first, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, recruiting change on the horizon for the Trojans. I think this one's really interesting. Getting back to basics, back to when they were the best. I think it's a really good update for them going forward. Let's jump into the article. We talk more about it on the other side. This is from SI.com. It says former USC Trojans coach Pete Carroll owned the state of California when it came to recruiting during his tenure in the 2000s. So much so, other programs didn't even bother coming in the Trojans' backyard because of the fence Carroll had built. The strategy began to fade under Clay Helton in the late 2010s, then completely fell off under Lincoln Riley over the past 4 recruiting cycles. Enter new general manager Chad Bowden, now leads the Trojans' recruiting efforts and is working to follow the template that was put in place by Carroll to bring USC back to national prominence. He says, "We're going to do everything through the city," Bowden said. "We're going to do everything through the state. That's going to be our primary focus." Now, it doesn't mean we're not going to dip into other states because you have to. We've done a lot of research. I do a lot of research every place I've been. Something that we found is when national championships were won here, when Rose Bowls were won here, you look at Pete Carroll's classes of 02, 03, 04, over 80% of recruiting classes were from the state of California. Love to hear that out of Bowden. I think we're bringing back a really critical change here for the Trojans. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick. But before we get to you, Trojans fans, in the comment section below, talk about the state of California. We're talking about falling away from recruiting in the past, but we're getting back there. But looking in the past for just a moment, are there any major recruits out of the state of California that you think the Trojans missed that they probably should have got over the past couple of years? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what do you think about this recruiting change for the Trojans?
I think Bryce Young is one that comes to mind personally, just my opinion. I think there's probably about a dozen, maybe dozens you could really allude to. And I think that's the key here. And I think this is, again, why you bring in a guy like Bowden. A lot of people thought, well, he's just going to replicate what he did at his prior stops, famously Notre Dame. He's going to take that kind of strategy to USC. That's not why you hire smart people. You don't hire smart people to be algorithms where they just come from programs and, well, I did X, Y, and Z. I'm going to do the exact same X, Y, and Z at my new program. That's not how it works. You hire smart, capable people who then solve problems. That's why Bowden was hired. That's why he's so successful at Notre Dame. He looked at Notre Dame's program and was like, what are the problems I can solve here to help us on a talent perspective? And he solved those problems. He's taken the same problem-solving approach to USC, and it's a different problem, right? Obviously, Notre Dame, USC, different schools, different environments, different everything, different regions, historically different, right? Different coaching staffs, completely different. But you take the problem-solving approach, not the same problems, not the same solutions, but the same approach, and that's exactly what Bowden has done here. And he's come up with a little bit of a Captain Obvious kind of thing, but it is so critical. We talk about it all the time on this channel. Successful programs, when it comes to recruiting, follow a very familiar 3-step pattern. They start local, immediate vicinity, excuse me. You've got to win that. If you don't win that, you're done. Then you expand to regional, right? And then you have to be hyper competitive. You've got to be one of the best in that. And then you go national. That is the order of operations that you have to do. Nick Saban proved this. When he went to Alabama after leaving the Miami Dolphins, the first thing he did was start to ingratiate himself with the high school coaching staff and all the people in that network in the state of Alabama. He kept recruiters on at Tuscaloosa that had worked with other failed regimes but had good recruiting connections. Why? Because he understood what is very, very obvious to a lot of people, but the same amount of people seem to screw this up too, is that the successful programs, you've got to start local, then go regional, then go national. That has to be the order. If you go the other way around, you become Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher in A&M says, I'm going to go national. I'm going to try and go local and regional when I can, but I'm going to go national. And the result was a disaster. One good recruited class totally falls apart. You can see this also, that what other things that can happen is if you focus too much local and too much regional, you can kind of flame out over time. You always have to expand. That's what happened with Clemson. They were too dependent on locally. They never became a national brand. USC, I think, after the success of Pete Carroll in a lot of ways, and of course, they had a lot of volatility with all the different coaches, they became, I think, a little too focused on being a national brand. We saw this in the early part of Lincoln Riley and with Caleb Williams. They were a national team. They felt almost like they are kind of like an NFL franchise in that regard where everybody knows them. Very, of course, great TV, Southern California, right? Everyone's has a memory of seeing USC in a Rose Bowl from when they were a kid, right? It just has this feel of being a national brand. But the USC Trojans were trying to live and recruit as a national brand first. That ain't going to get it done. You got to start local, then go regional, then go national. I'm going to keep repeating it till I'm blue in the face. That is the pattern of success, and that's exactly what Bowden is doing here. Phenomenal job, and it should lead to a lot of great results for the Trojans.
Yeah, Nick, and I think we're already seeing some good work being done here. And Bowden's only just barely started as far as his job here. Look at this 2025 class that he was not a part of. They got 5 guys out of the state of California. I will say they did get more guys out of California than they did any other region. Georgia, they got 4. Texas, they got 4. Florida, they got 2. And there's a litany of other states where they got onesies guys out of. But overall, 5 guys out of California, 14th in recruiting rankings. It's okay, but you already look at the change here. You look at 2026. 7 guys out of the state of California already, the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the 2026 class. You can already see the stark contrast, the stark difference. They're going after guys. They're getting people out of the state of California big time. And the only really big national guys is a 5-star, Xavier Griffin, the athlete out of Georgia. They grab that guy because, hey, like you said, we've done the research. We know the big time players around the country. We're not going to exclude them, but we're getting our guys. We're getting the local guys, and you already see it. 7 guys out of the state of California, 11 guys total. That's a mass. That's over 50% out of the state of California, and you love to see it because there's so much talent in the state of California. You really don't have to leave your own backyard. You can recruit California, get a few guys from around the country as far as good guys, and you're going to be a dominant football team. Pete Carroll proved it. This is a great strategy so far, and I'm really loving this by USC so far. And I think this just goes to show a bigger narrative we're seeing. I think it shows Lincoln Riley is evolving as a coach because he's not afraid to let new people in, let fresh perspectives in, give up the way that he was doing things that weren't necessarily working, and have these smart guys come in on the defensive side of the ball. Let all these guys, he said, okay, I get Grinch out of here. We're starting anew. We're getting all these great coaching hires, getting great, defensive players through our recruiting. We're going to build a great defense. Then gets the new general manager and you're saying, hey, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I really think we're seeing the evolution of Lincoln Riley into more of a head coach, less of that play caller that people may have seen him in as a past. And I like it so far. I like what's going on here in Southern Cal. I think there's a really bright future here, and I want to see how it progresses, but I think we're going to see them lock down the state of California here pretty soon.
And the emphasis on recruiting is really important too. In this modern era with NIL and the transfer portal, a lot of programs basically live and die by the transfer portal. Bowden actually came out with some interesting comments. This is from Outkick.com, and I think is really insightful. He said, we're going to take the most high school kids this place has ever taken this year. I truly believe a culture could be built through recruiting and could be done especially when they're in high school. So think about that for a second. Building that culture, recruiting when they're in high school. How hard is it to deal with a kid in that culture if they're on the other side of the country? If they're on the East Coast, if they're in New Jersey, if they're in South Florida, and you're in Los Angeles, that's hard to develop that relationship and recruit in high school. But if it's in Los Angeles, if it's in Orange County, if it's in Southern California, very easy, or at least certainly very doable. That's what we're seeing here from Bowden. He goes on to say, we're going to recruit the most guys we ever have. I've never been a part of what we're about to do when it comes to how many guys we're going to take. And that goes to my original statements there about taking that problem-solving approach, not following the same path he did at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, they relied a little bit more on transfers, but taking the same analytical problem-solving approach and solving a different problem with the USC Trojans. And it's winning in the recruiting and winning Southern California. There are 2 regions in this country, I truly believe this, where if one team can dominate those regions, they will win or at least play each other for the national title if they dominate them concurrently. That's any team that dominates Southern California and any team that dominates South Florida. Whoever wins those 2 regions, you're going to, if they, like Miami, of course, famously did in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, they were great. USC, of course, did that in the Pete Carroll era with Southern California. Whoever can win those two areas, and right now those areas are for grabs, right? And obviously USC has a great opportunity to dominate Southern California. If they do that, they'll win national titles. It's that simple, folks. It is literally that simple because we know Lincoln Riley's a good coach. He's proven it in Oklahoma. He's proven it at times with USC. He can win you a title, at least get you there. You just need to solve the talent problem. They've added a lot of great hires to the coaching staff. It literally comes down to just winning those local guys. It sounds so simple. It's not easy, of course, but then it sounds so simple, but if they do it, they win. This is the problem to solve, and Bowden is pulling out all the stops to make sure they solve it. Again, the first step to solving the problem is recognizing what the right problem is. A lot of programs, they screw it up. They sit there and figure out, or they try and solve something that's not the real problem. Bowden, you hire him, you bring him in, give him a lot of money and say, fix this program. He is making the right moves to do that, and USC is trending in the right spot to get them back to winning national titles. And Miles, this is where I'll throw it over to you for a second. Obviously, it's going to take a few years for all of this to settle out. When do you think USC fans should expect this team to be competing again for national titles? Is it this season, right? Are they closer than people think? Or is it 2-3 years from now when they finally get to see some of these recruiting classes come together?
I would say not this year. I don't think this is the year for the Trojans, but I do think it's going to be sooner than people think. I think next year they're going to be a strong contender, but I think in that 2027 class, when that class comes in, that is going to be this team at its strongest point. You want to get two recruiting classes in here, and I think already what we're seeing is really strong. I think they're going to have a chance to contend in 2026. Going to have to kind of be dependent on who all they're able to lock down if they can fill some key positions. But I think 2027, that's going to be the year for this team. I think, like he said, we're going to see, because already in 2026, they've got 11 recruits, and he says they're going to pull in more kids than they've ever seen before. I think it's going to be quite interesting. Maybe we're talking 20, 25 recruits when it's all said and done coming to Southern Cal. So I could be wrong there. It could be sooner than we think. But I think 2026, 2027, that's the time frame I'm looking. And I think the Trojans, they're going to be contenders sooner than people think.
If you look at Bowden's time at Notre Dame, right, he was basically promoted to the whatever general manager position or whatever it was before being director of recruiting and then general manager. That was his final job title. Okay, there you go. So if you look at when he joined the team in 2021 and when he became the GM in 2024, right, it took a few years to get enough recruiting classes under the books for Notre Dame. I think it'll be faster with USC. Notre Dame has more recruiting challenges. They're not in the conference. Indiana versus Southern California, not a terrible area to recruit in the Midwest, but Southern California is better. USC is a better in terms of name brand than Notre Dame, even though Notre Dame's brand is pretty great. I think USC is a little bit better. Lincoln Riley, I think, is a better name brand and a better, sort of coach to play for than Freeman in terms of trying to go to the NFL. Even though Freeman's great, I think Lincoln Riley's just better. I think it's going to be a little bit quicker. I think we're looking at maybe a year timeline ahead of what happened in Notre Dame. So while it took the fourth year for Notre Dame to make a run to the college football national title game, I'm looking at the third year of Bounds' reign. So it's not going to be 2025. I don't think it's going to be 2026. But if you look at 2027, I know USC fans, that seems very impatient to make you guys wait that long. I think by that season, you will be in the national title game, very close to it, or winning the whole darn thing. That's how good of a GM Bowden is, and that's how long it will take for him to solve all the problems. Maybe you go on a run and get there earlier. I certainly hope you guys do for your sake, but I think you can expect by no later than 3 years from now, this team will be back to competing for national titles.